Hey, PD Grizz here. I want to talk about my newest acquisition that just came in the mail today that for some reason was sitting in my local post office for nearly a full week before they finally delivered it. And it came in this little pouch here, which was not original equipment. This pouch is made by Colpin, and if you know anything about firearms, you know that they're like a manufacturer of various firearms accessories, cleaning kits, cases, that kind of stuff. But anyway, it fits in here quite nicely. But what we have here is the Wenger pocket tool chest. Oh wait, no, the Wenger tool chest plus. Forgive me. But anyway, the tool chest plus, I don't know why I have trouble saying that. This was for quite a few years, the thickest practical Swiss Army knife available. Now, what I mean by practical is I mean that it wasn't designed specifically as a collector's piece, like the Wenger Giant or the Victorinox XAVT, which despite, some of the guys that'll claim, oh, the XVAT is total practical and, I carry one all the time and it fits in my pocket. No, BS. I mean, the fact that Victorinox felt the need to include not one but two of the bit drivers on the XVAT shows that they were just looking to pad out the thickness any way they could. And in their own description on one of their documentaries, specifically says it was made as a collector's model. But anyway, I'm not here to argue about stuff like that. It's silly. But this was the largest model made by either thicc or Wenger for quite a few years, when at the time, Victorinox largest model was the Swiss Champ, which is either 7 or 8 layers, depending on how you count the layers. I count them by the spacers. So since the saw and the descaler tool don't have a spacer between them, I consider that 1 layer. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 layers. But most people call it 8 layers. Whatever, that's just a matter of semantics and preference. This is an impressive 10 layers, including that thick boy layer that is actually 2 layers, because you see the plastic splits off into 2 hinges for that compass layer. But to start off, we have the typical opening layer with the patented locking screwdriver and the stripping notch. The typical Wenger can opener. I haven't even cleaned this knife yet. I literally just received it, so I like showing the condition they came in. Then the next layer is the infamous ruler / compass. The compass can be easily removed from there. You can push it right out. The problem with these old liquid filled compasses is that the liquid often comes out of them after a number of years, so I don't think this one works very good. It still kind of works, but there seems to be some resistance in there, and I think it's because it's dried out inside. I don't know if it ever had liquid or if it was just meant to float on it, air on a tight pivot, but it seems to catch around the edges. You can kind of see it moving in there, but it'll kind of hang up, and then you shake it and it'll move. And the way this works is you have to manipulate the north-south till you get the poles inside lined up with that clear. So it's not a great compass, but I guess it would work in a pinch. The ruler is clear, so that it would help you use as a scaler on maps, stuff like that. So that's a pretty cool tool. The next layer is the Wenger magnifying glass with a screwdriver at the tip. And the Wenger magnifying glass, despite being smaller diameter than the Victorinox, does have a higher magnification. Works pretty good as a magnifying glass. Problem is sometimes you see these missing because I think having a magnifying glass in what essentially is a tiny pry bar is a bad idea, because the second somebody gets tempted to pry something with this, it flexes just enough that the lens pops out. So I think it would have just been a better idea not to include a screwdriver tip on it, because where most people see a screwdriver, there's always going to be that one knucklehead that sees a pry bar. The next layer is Wenger's descaler / hook remover / line guide. And the line guide is meant to be used like if you're putting new line on a fishing reel, you can use that to manipulate the line up and down to get an even disbursement on a fishing reel. The next layer after that is think, yeah, is the metal file, which I believe is identical, nearly identical to the one on the 84mm models. I have a Master Craftsman small that I've already mentioned on and on about, but that's going on its way to Switzerland now to have a file made for it. But I think they would be able to adapt this that they still make for the 85mm Delamont series to fit it, because pictures and size and everything, it matches up pretty well. The next layer is, if I can get it out, the wood saw, and which is unique for the wood saw for the Wenger tools. Wenger kept their wood saw using a nail nick largely, but for this one they did make it a little longer so that it works like the Victorinox saw and you can just grab the end of it, which is why I couldn't get at it first, because I was pulling for a nail nick and didn't realize it stuck over the edge a little bit. The next layer is the Wenger scissors. The Wenger scissors have a obviously completely different size design to Victorinox scissors. They use this torsion bar, which works as a lever on the back spring to give you the spring action. And because it doesn't have a separate piece fit in that's delicately made like the leaf spring on Victorinox scissors, you don't have to worry about that spring breaking or being lost pretty much at all. The one downside is because of the way that spring is made as part of the thickness of the overall tool. The tool is very thin because basically the tool has to be half as thick as the layer it takes up. So otherwise that spring would be very fat and this would just take up a ridiculously unnecessarily thick layer. The next layer is one of my least favorite Wenger tools, and that's this little silly multi-wrench thing. And I don't know if you've ever tried to use one of these in the real world, but it's hardly practical. You've got to have a extremely easy access to the nut, and I know on some of the models it's closer to the middle, which makes it very hard to reach because a lot of times the nut is going to be on the end of something and you just can't even get to it. This one's not too bad, but I'm just not a big fan of these. I prefer the Victorinox having the magnifying glass on the other side of that inline screwdriver, which is what you get on the Wenger style tools. You get the inline screwdriver and the wrench as a combination, rather than the inline screwdriver and a magnifying glass. The inline screwdriver Phillips is a little bit shorter because the wrench has to be longer, but it works fine, and it also has that patented locking feature, so it doesn't stop at 90 degrees like a Victorinox one does, but it's not going to, while pressing down on it, it's very unlikely that it would release and cause you to slip and bust your knuckles. The next layer is the pliers. Now, the Wenger pliers are kind of ingenious in that they actually have their slip joint pliers, so you can grab a fairly substantial nut or bolt or whatever, something larger. It gives you two complete different settings to work with within the spring tension, so it's kind of nice. It might be overkill, but I appreciate the engineering and thought that went into this tool. And then finally we get the back layer, which is the main blade, which seems to be the only tool on here which really saw any use. Obviously somebody didn't know how to sharpen a blade. I guess they were trying to sharpen it with the end of a shovel or something, but either way, that's pretty typical. Eventually I'll take the time to polish that out and restore it to a mirror finish. And then it has the nail file with nail cleaner, which I appreciate having on the Swiss Army knives. I think to me that's more useful than having a second blade. Now on the back, you've got a pretty much open space on the back except for the corkscrew and the reamer, which are on opposite sides. So all this middle space is just wasted area where Victorinox chose to find ways to slip more tools in there. Wenger just never went with that, and they just stuck to the two back tools. And then on the end you would have the toothpick and tweezers. This one's tweezers are push down into there, so I'm going to have to get something in there to get them out. Actually, until I looked at it just now, I thought they were missing entirely, but I can see they're in there. They've just been shoved way down into there. It's probably been dropped on this end or something, knocking the tweezers in there. That is just a flaw in the Wenger design. I find that all the time, that the toothpick and tweezers can be tough to get out because they just slide just a little bit too far into the scales, and then they're hard to get out. It's got the little chain that came with many of the knives. You know, some people like it, some people don't, like anything else. This one has the embossed emblem, which by the time this was made, which appears to be in the 90s, many of the knives were only coming with a printed logo. So that was pretty much an upgrade, although I suspect that was probably more common on the larger knives. I don't think the larger knives would have been as likely to have an economy version just because of how much cost went into producing them in the first place. It just seems like they would usually have the full package. But anyway, so that is my video on the Wenger Tool Chest Plus. It's a knife I've been looking for a long time. I'm super excited to finally have one in my collection. And this, for a long time was the largest Swiss Army knife that you could buy that was practical. I mean, now there's a Swiss Champ XLT, XXLT, XAVT, and, where the practicality stops, that's entirely up to you. But I think when they start repeating the same tool on them, that's when it starts to get ridiculous. Anyway, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Petey Grizz, out.